Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast for military and veterans. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, and provide value and solutions to help make life more abundant. All right. Welcome to episode number 1 of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here, to listen, to hear the value, to listen to people's stories. You know, this podcast is something that has been a vision of mine for honestly, probably over a year, but more in depth over the last year. And I'm so excited to finally be able to bring this vision to life and to just create a platform where members of the military and veterans can just speak their truth, share their story with the world. I have to say the inspiration for this podcast came from not only my own journey, but it really is just a tribute. And it's made in loving memory of those that I have lost to suicide or depression or mental illness throughout my time in the Navy. And not even just dedicated to military, but veterans and even civilians. Mental health is something that is such a massive issue that has just started to be talked about in the world. And there's still so much to learn, still so much to know. But I think that talking and awareness is really just a massive step in the right direction. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for just taking the time to be here to listen to people's stories and to allow people the opportunity to speak their truth and be heard. So with that being said, I don't want to really give too much of a bio because this is actually my story that I'm sharing today. If it runs too long, I might have to do a 2-part episode, but we will see how it goes and just kind of take it from there. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel. I grew up in Iowa, actually. If you're from Iowa and you got super excited, shout out to you. Us Iowans always get super excited when we meet each other in the military because we are a very rare breed. You don't see a lot of Navy coming out of Iowa, but I am from Iowa. I spent, 21 years of my life there, I want to say, and lived in Des Moines most of my life, lived in northern Iowa, Cedar Falls, Waterloo for a couple of years. I love Iowa. It will always have my heart, but I will never live there again. Sorry to my friends that live there. Iowa's just not it for me, but it'll always be home. And I still have family that live there. And I do get back and visit occasionally. Now I'm out on the West Coast because of the Navy, but in 2012 is the initial time that I first enlisted into the Navy. A lot of people don't know that. I ended up dropping out of the delayed entry program, didn't really move much further with joining the Navy at that point. And my recruiter at the time told me I would never be able to join the Navy again. I said, okay, was okay with that decision. I actually ended up dropping out of the delayed entry program because I was in a very toxic relationship. I was dating a guy who him and I were together for three years, I want to say. And, I was working 3 jobs and I was taking care of really everything. We had a dog together and, with him not working and me working, in hindsight, looking back, I should have just done what I wanted to do anyway, but everything's a lesson learned. Everything happens for a reason. And I believe that I joined the Navy when I joined for a very specific reason. So grateful for, every experience, good and bad in my life. But I don't know if I should get into like mental health background. So maybe we'll save that for another episode. But I really want to talk about my experiences in the Navy because that's really what this show is revolved around. And so I think it's important to talk about it. So I joined the Navy again in 2014 is when I entered the delayed entry program. My goals and aspirations were to be an air rescue swimmer. I actually worked my ass off doing PSTs. I was like the only female in the state of Iowa that was going for a spec war program. And so that was super empowering. And I made so much progress and I learned so much. And that's realistically the first time that I like really deep dove into some form of personal development. And I didn't even realize it at that time, but I was constantly listening to motivational speeches and really just honing in on self-discipline and getting better every single day. And I'm really proud of myself for the process during that time period. Unfortunately, I didn't end up making it into that program. So I ended up leaving for boot camp in avionics. And so in the Navy with avionics, you're kind of assigned a rate or job, for those of you that don't know what rate means. And AT, aviation electronics technician, I level, intermediate level, is what I was selected for. So went off to boot camp March 2015. Met some incredible people there. It was actually a very empowering experience as a female, especially out of Iowa. I really opened up my eyes to how different people are across the US alone, because I think when you come from a Midwestern state that is very, sheltered, for lack of a better word, compared to some other states, you just don't realize what else is out there. And so it was very humbling to me to meet all these other people from all these different states and just realize the beautiful differences and the diversity between people. I have friends that to this day I am still in touch with from boot camp 6.5 years ago and love them to death. Incredible people. But what lessons did I learn out of boot camp? Oh my goodness. Like I remember leaving boot camp feeling like the Navy was it was an environment where I could be comfortable being just myself. And I don't know if it's because I was in an environment of like all females and that's who I was mostly surrounded by. And when you're around all females, I think for me as a female, it just made me feel a little more safe. Because my background, which I know I didn't get into, there were a lot of times where I just didn't feel safe around a lot of groups of males. And so when I left Navy boot camp and they instilled this kind of attitude into you that, you know, everyone's your family, these are your brothers and sisters, we look out for each other. And that's kind of what I thought was just the whole environment of the Navy. People were a little more respectful in boot camp. So I wasn't ready, I guess, for the culture shock that came after boot camp. But anyway, so I graduated boot camp. I went to A school. And my A school was in Florida. I don't know if I'm completely ready to talk about my whole Florida experience, but I will say that like mentally, I was not in a great place. I did have some really fun experiences, don't get me wrong, but there were also some really bad experiences. The one thing that I will talk about is that I got in trouble when I was down there. I was actually right before I was supposed to leave Florida, and I got sent to a captain's mast, which is a non-judicial punishment in the Navy. And it was for buying alcohol for underage. That's what my charges were, I guess, for my non-judicial punishment. And, it was a very humbling experience for me. It was also a terrifying experience for me because I wasn't someone that was used to getting in trouble like that. And when you get in trouble in a training environment in the military, they treat you like you are the worst person in the world and that you do this all the time. And I was like, it's not me. I'm not the kind of person that gets in trouble like this. But, I appreciated the people afterwards when I got in trouble that just kind of moved on from it and didn't dwell in the past and the fact that I fucked up and, just took it for what it was. Like, hey, you admitted to what happened. We're moving on, learn from it, do better. It actually really didn't affect my career that much at all. Crazy enough, people make it sound like it does, but the thing that was really instilled in me from that point with the Navy is that if you just tell the truth and you're honest, it's going to be better for you than if you try to cover up, lie, whatever have you. So that's kind of that mentality that I had, but it also made me a little more aware of my actions and my decisions when I left that environment and I moved on to my next command. And I was just really in this mentality of like, okay, I want to prove myself. I want to prove that I'm not a piece of shit. Like, I know I'm better than this. I went through this rough period, but we're going to make it better. And so I left Florida and I got sent to my first and only duty station the entire time I was in Washington. And at my first command, I don't want to give names of commands specifically, but the first command that I went to was probably the biggest culture shock for me. And I say this because all I had ever known was civilian jobs. I worked since I was 14 years old. The Navy environment's just so different. It's just so crazy. Like, I don't even really know how to explain it, but like, so I arrived at my duty station late at night, like late. And got to my barracks and everything. And my very first encounter was like this drunk guy in the barracks that was like trying to hit on my sponsor and hit on me. And like, we were locked out of the barracks area and we just wanted him to let us in. And he was just kind of being an asshole. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. And I have all my bags and it's cold and it's like 2 a.m. and I just want to go to bed. But anyway, so that's my very first experience on the base that I was stationed at. And then I get to work and, to summarize, I guess, for the longest time where I worked, I was really the only female in the area that I worked in. And it didn't bother me at all that I was the only female, but there's definitely a different dynamic when you're already in a male dominated job and you're the only female. And so I just kind of want to point out a couple things that really hit home for me, if that's even the right term, from that place that I was at. So the first one is that when I first got there, people were very friendly to me. But later on, I found out that there was ill intentions with the friendliness. Actually, all of the guys, this is complete, like what I heard from other people. So complete hearsay. Obviously, I have no way to confirm this, but I was told later on that before I arrived at my command, that everyone pulled up my Facebook and that the guys in the shop were calling dibs on me. And so the one guy friend that I had when I got there that I thought was just a really good friend of mine wasn't actually trying to be my friend. It was just that he called dibs on me at that time. And obviously I had no idea. But yeah, I mean, I didn't find out about this until later on when I got married and I was told, oh, hey, well, now we can tell you because you're married and it doesn't matter, but this is what happened. And, it was constantly a thing where I would see people pulling up someone's Facebook that was coming to a new command and kind of prejudging that person just based off of their Facebook and their pictures and what they looked like and the lifestyle they lived, just based off of a social media account. And, I've heard other accounts of this, but obviously that's other people's stories. I'm not going to take away from someone else's story, but this is just my experience. And that's just one little thing. Other things that happened in that environment, I remember getting touched inappropriately at work and no one doing anything about it. I remember sharing a story at work about a experience with sexual assaults that I had had. And I'm not going to get into the specific experience right now, but I remember sharing that at my command where I was at, and I was just an E3 at this time. And so as an E3, you really just don't know the ropes. You don't really know like what's acceptable, what isn't. Like, there's kind of this culture that like, if you say anything about sexual assault or sexual harassment, that you are kind of like a snitch or a shitty person. And like, that is not in rules or regulations anywhere, just to be 100% clear. It's just kind of like a culture thing, especially coming out of A school, because I know people that when I was in A school that reported certain things of, certain instances of sexual harassment or sexual assault and just got like completely ostracized by everyone around them. And so like, you don't want to be that person. And so you kind of laugh it off and just kind of like bury these situations and experiences. But so like that was my, I guess the brief synopsis of my time at the first command that I was at. My second command is probably where I experienced the most when it came to my mental health. And it's crazy because when I first showed up to that command, I absolutely loved it. I was so incredibly excited and ecstatic, and I was excited to learn a new platform. I really loved the leadership. I loved the people I worked with. I loved the dynamic. And I was just very motivated to learn and to start being able to go out on deployments, because it was a sea duty command. And goodness, like I don't know if I can tell you a specific time where there was like a flip of the switch when it came to just the environment. I'm a strong believer that environment is everything. And I think that holds so much weight in the military, because you have new people coming in and out all the time. And if you don't have that right environment of good, solid leaders or people that are willing to learn to be better leaders, then it can create a very toxic environment. And that's really what my command turned into. So where do I even start here? I went off to my C school, which is like a secondary schooling, to learn more about your specific job. And I remember when I was in my C school, just working my ass off back at my command, even though I didn't have to learn qualifications, to learn the things that were really going to like propel me to the next level, because I really wanted to succeed there. And I wanted to get these qualifications. I wanted a good eval. And I wanted to do well. I had very big dreams, goals, and aspirations. At the time, I didn't know if I wanted to do 4 years and get out or do my 20 years. I still had a little bit of time to decide. But as of that point, I really loved what I was doing and where I was at. I remember there being a specific individual who was in a leadership position over me. And I personally just felt like this individual went out of their way to make sure that I wasn't succeeding. Now, obviously, this is just personal perception from me at the time. I can't tell you whether or not this was actually happening or whether this was their intention, but that's what I felt at the time. And it was really hard for me because I was still trying my absolute hardest to get things done and to get my qualifications, but this person was making it extremely difficult to do so. And, now looking back in hindsight, I understand that everyone's going through their own thing, and someone's own experience isn't a reflection of me, and how they treat me is not a reflection of me. It's a reflection of them. But at the time, I didn't realize that. And so it was very hard for me to keep up my motivation when I felt like I was being sabotaged. So I don't really think that I let it affect me too much. My command was very, very good about helping me out, and knowing that I wanted to go to school and I wanted to put in an officer package. And they really accommodated me so well with letting me take my classes so that I could put in my officer package, and letting me do all these things so that I could put in this package. And to this day, I appreciate that so much. I didn't end up getting picked up for the program. Otherwise, I would still be in the military right now. But I finished up my schooling. Command was great, helped me out. And they sent me off on my first deployment. And my first deployment is probably where I got the true picture of what leadership was like. And I wouldn't say that was the worst of it, but one thing that was kind of a theme every single time I went on a deployment is that you'd work really, really hard. And then when you're done working, people would just drink and smoke because a lot of times they were just so miserable with everything that was happening between work and, if there's things going on at home and if they feel unsupported, and people would just drink. And I went on three total. And looking back, because I do so much reflecting now, like it's heartbreaking to me that there's these massive signs of depression and anxiety and mental health issues that you see as a common theme with sailors, I will say, when they're deployed, and oftentimes when they're not deployed, when they're home too. And I also see this common theme of, instead of trying to help people and make things better, or, have conversations and ask what people need, everyone just kind of brushes it off as like normalcy, like drinking to oblivion is normal as long as you don't get in trouble. And that's not normal. I'll tell you that right now. Like, the amount of drinking that people did when I was deployed with them was not close to normal. But because they made it to work okay, the next day it was okay. And it's kind of one of those like hush hush things, like, oh, we're not really going to talk about it because, as long as it's not on paper and as long as no one else knows about it, then we're fine. But I think it's definitely like a massive concern and a massive problem, and it just isn't being addressed and it isn't being talked about. So here we are putting it out in light. This is a problem in the Navy. But anyway, I kind of got a little off track there. But I think the biggest thing for me when I went on my first deployment and subsequent deployments was just the leadership. And my first deployment, I did have some really amazing leaders, but then I also had some leaders that were not so amazing. And I will say on the first detachment, it was more at the E6 level, where I just felt that the leadership really wasn't there fully. And it just didn't really seem like the E6s were taking on that role that an E6 should take on. I was an E4 at the time. And I felt like if I brought up concerns or anything, that they would just kind of be brushed off. But anyway, so just kind of seeing that snippet of poor leadership, I decided at that time that I didn't want to be in anymore, that I wanted to get out at my 4-year mark. Unfortunately, the Navy had dropped an instruction a few months back about extending, matching up your end of contract to your projected rotation date. And I had already put in an extension for my contract. And so with that, there was nothing that I could do other than just serve out the rest of my time on my contract. So anyway, fast forward a few months later, I go on my second detachment, and I was supposed to go to one place that I really wanted to go to, but about 2 weeks ahead of time, my command switched me to a different site, which is fine. But this is a story that I really want to hit on the most, because this is probably where my mental health was the absolute worst. And this is kind of where my mental health journey with the Navy really begins, kind of full-fledged. But anyway, so I go on this deployment, and man, I just remember I was being sent out there on this deployment because I didn't have a qualification that my command wanted me to have. And because I wasn't a CDI, I should say that, collateral duty inspector, for those of you who know what it is. If you know, you know. But essentially, like, if you don't know what a CDI is, like, you're the person that like looks over everything, signs off and says it's good. You're one of the last eyes to look at something. And as a maintainer, like, it's a very important qualification to have. It's not required at the E4 level. It just makes you look good. I decided that I personally didn't want to get it because A, I knew I wanted to get out. B, my command and my leadership at the time was not great to the CDIs. I always said that they used and abused them. And, if you talk to some of the people that had the CDI qualification that were really good at their jobs, I'm sure they would attest to this too. But again, I can't speak for someone else's story, but I just remember seeing these like overworked people that were just, not really getting time off. They were getting sent out on the road all the time to deploy. And I was like, that's not the lifestyle I want. And so I decided, I'll just play my part as a worker. I was pretty decent at it. To this day, I never want to do that job ever again because it's not for me. But I definitely did my job as a worker to the best of my ability. So anyway, I got sent out on this deployment with this person whose CDI was in routing as we were on our way out there. And I tried my hardest to go out there with a very open mind. I didn't know this individual super well. We had kind of a little bit of a past history with slight disagreements, but I try to keep an open mind with everyone, especially when I'm working with them. And so I was like, I'll go out there, clean slate. Like, I know what I know. This person knows what they know. And, we'll just kind of make it happen. We'll get the job done. So, it was tough for me because it was kind of this weird dynamic where, I was the worker and this individual was the CDI and also two ranks above me. I actually ended up making E5 when I was on this deployment. But when we first got out there, 2 ranks above me. And we just didn't work well together. Like at the end of the day, that's what it was. For me personally, I felt like it was that this individual didn't have the knowledge and wasn't willing to listen to what I had to say. I can't really tell you what this individual's perspective was. We kind of had a chat one day when things got really heated, but I can't speak for someone else's perspective. So I'm not going to sit there and say what this individual was thinking or feeling at the time. But all I know is that for me, I just really felt like I wasn't allowed to, for lack of a better word, collaborate or share my ideas or my knowledge. And that this individual was just kind of out there really taking the time to learn, but kind of at my expense. And so these are my feelings back then at the time. No hard feelings now, but this is kind of what really led up to my rough patch with my mental health issues that I was having out there. So on top of just feeling like there was a really poor work dynamic, and then my LPO when I was out there, leading petty officer, for those of you who don't know the Navy lingo, I remember every single day this individual would ask us how is everyone today? And I remember telling this individual multiple times that I was not okay. But I think that mental health and suicide, this sounds awful. I think that mental health and suicide are regarded as such a joke in the Navy, that people literally laugh it off. And I brought this up to several levels of leadership in the Navy before. And, the response that I got back was, oh, just don't let that shit slide. Tell people to cut it out. But it goes so much deeper than that when it's a whole culture thing. I think that the idea of mental health and suicide makes people extremely uncomfortable. And that's why they kind of laugh it off and joke about it. But yeah, I mean, it really got to a point where I was in my room by myself and I was, confiding in one of my friends that was out there and just kind of telling my friend, I'm not okay. I don't know what to do. And, my friend was there to talk me through things and whatnot. But I really just felt super alone out there because I wasn't doing what everyone else was doing, which was drinking to oblivion every single night. And the one time that I did go out with a group of people, it was just a really bad experience because of everyone drinking to oblivion. And knowing that I already had an alcohol related incident on my record, it was just, I didn't want to put myself in a situation where it could be misconstrued as wrong place, wrong time. So I spent a lot of time by myself when I was on that deployment. I will say that like it did get to a point where this will always like stand out in my head, because this is probably like almost the peak of where my mental health got the worst. But I was out working on the aircraft that I was working on. And I, at one point, had literally taken the chains from the aircraft and wrapped it around my neck. And there was like 5-6 people standing a few feet away from me. And I remember leaning into these chains, and literally my face got like purple. Like I have a picture still of this moment on my phone till this day. I don't know why I took a picture, but I remember just like sitting there and just thinking to myself, like, I could end my life right now with 6 people standing right there and no one would say a thing. And no one did. And I don't know why. I don't know if, I asked someone later, like, why didn't you do anything or say anything? Because I think if I remember right, the story's a little choppy in my head, but I think someone walked by and kind of like chuckled a little bit. And like, because I like chuckled / laughed, this individual was like, oh, well, you're smiling, so I thought you were okay. Disclaimer to anyone listening, if someone has chains wrapped around their neck, that's not okay. Like, that's a joke even, that's not okay. Personal opinion, but the experiences that I have been through personally tell me that if anyone's even joking about anything like suicidal mental health, that they're probably actually using it as a mask to deal with something else. And maybe it's worth exploring what's really happening. So anyway, that happened. And then I remember my very last day of the deployment, because one of the signs for me when I was really depressed, and this happened on just about every single deployment I went on, is that I would sleep in and I would miss my alarm, and we would always have to drive to where we worked compared to where we lived at. And I would constantly sleep in, and I would miss the meetup times to go to where we needed to go. And I remember like the very last day that we were out there, I had slept in and I missed our little caravan over to where we were going to. And we always got there like an hour and a half early just to make sure we had time to do everything and prep ahead of time. I recognized that I woke up late. I let the group know. There was just like everything kind of happened in like the weirdest order. So like I walked outside to meet the group. I realized they were gone already because I was late. Apparently they had like called me in my room while I was outside, and I didn't realize that they had called me in my room. So then I went back inside. I was trying to get a hold of people, couldn't get a hold of anyone. And so I walked my ass to work. I think it maybe took like 20 minutes, half an hour, but I walked there because I was like, I fucked up. I woke up late. I'm not going to expect someone to come give me a ride. It is what it is. And so, yeah, so I walked into work. And then when I walked into work, I got met with what's called a counseling chit. And it was the first counseling chit that I'd ever got, and the only counseling chit, negative, I should say, while I was in the Navy. And I think what blew my mind the most wasn't the fact that I got a counseling chit. It's the fact that there was zero conversation surrounding that counseling chit to figure out what was going on and to figure out if I was okay. And, I have zero problem taking responsibility for my actions. If I worded that right, I don't mind taking responsibility for my actions, but what I do mind is when when leadership isn't talking to people when patterns visibly change. And I will say that all the junior enlisted that kind of knew me throughout my time in the Navy recognized pattern changes, but no one higher up ever did. And I think that's another massive problem in the Navy. It's just leadership not knowing their people and not recognizing pattern and behavior changes enough to step in and say, okay, what's going on? What can I do to help you? What resources can we provide? So anyway, I came back from that deployment and I took a decent amount of leave. And that's where I really decided, like, okay, something needs to change, because even after 30 days, I was still feeling extremely depressed. I was not okay. And that's when I kind of decided to get into therapy. And oh my goodness. So this medical side of things, I remember going to therapy or going to mental health and telling them that I needed help. And my mental health journey with the Navy honestly starts long before this. So I'll probably have to do a whole other episode on that. But just to kind of like summarize my experience with it, like the wait list is just long. And this is something I've brought up several times. I know I'm not the only person that deals with this, because I've talked to other people who have dealt with this as well. And where I was at, the wait list was like not even long compared to some other places. But I remember just talking to someone on the base I was at and saying, like, okay, I understand that if I am suicidal and at a risk to myself, you guys can get me in right away. And I understand that if I am not at a risk to myself, that I have to wait these 30 plus days to see someone. However, what if you have someone who knows that 30 days is going to be too long, and that if in that 30 days they have to wait, that they might be at risk to themselves? What then? And the solutions that I was given was to talk to the chaplain, to go to Fleet and Family. And for someone like me, and I don't know if anyone else can relate to me and, you know, what I felt at that time, but I don't like to have to re-explain myself a million times. And bouncing around from therapist to therapist to therapist, you kind of, or me, I should say, not you, but I kind of felt like I was less willing each time to share my story in depth, because I just kind of got sick of explaining it. So that was kind of my biggest hurdle with mental health on a medical level. I was able to eventually get help out in town after literally having a yelling match with my psychiatrist in mental health. Literally like threw his hands up in the air at me and told me, like, you just have to wait. That's what it is. That's what it is. And man, like, yeah. And I don't even think my experience is like the worst story I've heard, but I don't want to keep this super negative. I just kind of want to share like little snippets of what I experienced, because if I get into everything right now, this episode's going to go way too long. But I really want to kind of focus on the command level stuff today, because that is such a huge part of kind of where everything started and the impact for me. But let's see. Once my command found out that I wanted to get out of the Navy and that I didn't want to get my CDI, collateral duty inspector qualification, there was just a massive shift in the attitude of the way they treated me. They would not approve my tuition assistance before I even got frocked to E5 for something that was going to benefit me when I got out, because I knew I was getting out in like year and a half, something like that. Would not approve it, and kind of backed me against a wall in this position where I had to get this qualification. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy to me, like just mind blowing to me how differently someone gets treated when someone finds out that that the Navy's not for them. And I don't know if this is across the board with all branches, but I've seen it personally a lot in the Navy. And I know a lot of people who will kind of like say their intentions are to stay in because they're kind of on the fence and they don't know. Because they know that the second they say, I want to get out, people treat you differently. which I don't agree with at all. But again, it's a culture thing and something that I think needs to be brought to light and talked about. But anyway, so I decided to end up getting this qualification because I'm like, what? Like, I literally will not be able to do what I want to do when I get out of the military if I don't appease these people. I didn't want the qualification, but I was like, whatever, I'll just kind of slowly make my way through it. Is what it is. It'll only be for a little bit because I'm getting out soon. So I started working on it. But literally a few months later, got hit with just like the biggest shock of my life when one of my coworkers who I had known for years, literally since I got to my first duty station, took their life. And it really hit me super hard. I had done a lot of work on myself, trying to like work on my own shit, my own mental health shit. And I was on antidepressant. And I didn't feel like I was in a super great place because I just like wasn't super happy in the environment I was at with my commands, but I was like stable, like I was okay. But when I found out about this individual taking their life, it really just crushed me. And not only because of the history and knowing this individual, but a lot of it too was just the fact that I just spoken to that individual a few nights before. And yeah, I mean, everything combined just kind of really hit me super hard. And so being in my work environment started to give me panic attacks, literally from the day I found out the individual took their life. And so I remember after kind of a few days off from work, I think the command gave everyone like a day or two off, but then wanted us back, mission must go on. Not everyone was affected. They provided, therapists and counselors at the command, but like I knew personally I could be in that space. And so I go to mental health and I told mental health, I was like begging them, please give me some kind of paperwork so that I don't have to be in that workspace. I cannot be there. I get panic attacks. And there's nothing, absolutely nothing they would do to help me. They told me you have an appointment with your psychiatrist in like 2 days. Just wait and talk to your psychiatrist. I said, I don't think you guys understand. I cannot be there. My command wasn't accommodating for me. They didn't want to, excuse me. They have to account for every single person every single day. So if you're not at work, you have to have some kind of paperwork. So they wouldn't help me out at all. Mental health wouldn't help me out at all. Thank goodness there was my doctor, one of the most beautiful souls I've ever met in my entire life. Literally like, there's not a lot of doctors out there that I can say really made an impact on my life, but this individual one did. And I really wish that I'd gotten the chance to like send a thank you note to this particular doctor just for how amazing he was, but I didn't. So if you're listening to this and you know who you are, thank you for the impact you made on my life. And thank you for helping me when I needed it the most and when no one else would. But yeah, so this doctor gave me a couple of weeks of SIQ, which is sick in quarters. And he helped me out so that I wouldn't have to be in a place that gave me panic attacks because my work didn't want to accommodate me to like send me up to different part of the building where I felt more safe or, anything of that nature, which I found very, very sad. I think that different individuals go through different experiences and things with mental health should definitely be handled on a case-by-case basis because not everyone needs that level of accommodation, but some people do. And if someone does, I think that on a case-by-case basis, those things should be handled to accommodate that person to make sure that they feel safe in their work environment. But anyway, I was finally able to get switched to a different command where I was able to just take the time to work on myself and to get better and to work on my own mental health. And that was probably the best decision that I ever made my entire time in the Navy. because I was actually able to focus on me for the first time in a long time. And my chain of command was phenomenal at the last place that I was at. I was really allowed to like thrive and shine and like really step into my own power and leadership capabilities there. And it really made such a positive impact on me and who I am. And I think that that's what really inspired the person that is creating this podcast, along with all my experiences in the Navy, but also my very last few experiences in the Navy really just molded and created this person who unapologetically speaks out on things that are fucked up, speaks out on things that need to be talked about. And I'm really proud of the person that I've become. Because honestly, like, I think that it takes guts to even come out and say stuff like this. But even within my time serving, a lot of the stuff that I did, a lot of people weren't willing to do or say. And it really breaks my heart that that's what the culture is, because I think everyone should be empowered to speak their truth in whatever work environment they're in, military or civilian. But until we talk about it, it can't change. And so hopefully this is the start of planting a seed of talking about the things that are going to create change. But wow, like I didn't even get into like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to my story that I need to share. So I'm going to have to probably do different episodes, just sharing kind of different parts. I would love to share with you guys more of my own personal background. I would love to share more what I experienced on the medical side of things with mental health. Yeah, but I think all in all, like looking back at everything that I went through, I don't look at it in a negative light anymore. I did for a really long time. I don't now, because I understand that everything in life happens for me. And if I didn't go through what I went through, I would not be the person I am today. I wouldn't be sharing this platform to allow other people to speak their truths. And I wouldn't have the impact on the lives that I have today. And so I say that in like not a vain way at all, because I love serving people. It brings me so much joy in my life. But yeah, that is just a snippet of my story. I'm super excited to share more. One thing that I did want to mention to you guys before I hop off, I don't even know how long I've gone, so I apologize for how lengthy this got. I love to speak. I love public speaking. I always have. But I wanted to just kind of put the plug in for my petition. I started it in 2019. It is to the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy. And it is just it's to make mental health better. And it's almost 1,500 signatures as it sits right now today, as I'm recording this episode. And my goal is really just to keep bringing awareness to mental health until a massive change is made. And when I say massive, like I should be hearing about it on the civilian side, massive, not like little changes within commands, although those are great. And I do hope that changes happen within commands, because I think that's where it starts. But I would love to see some policy changes and some changes within the trainings, and really just pushing to change the culture. So I will put a link, or at least put the description of where to go to that petition at in the description for this episode. And if you did sign already, I would appreciate it so much if you would share the petition. I want to blow it up so that some change starts to happen. So it's been 2 years now. Not a lot has happened yet. I think COVID kind of took the reins of, you know, what was hyped up in the media, but I think mental health definitely needs its spotlight to be hyped up, especially in the military. So thank you guys so much for listening to this. If you made it this far, I appreciate you so much. You guys are all awesome, and I can't wait to share more of my story and share more value with you guys. Till next time. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in today. Each week, I'll be bringing you value in the mental health space and its direct impact on service members and veterans. If you feel you personally got value today from this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a 5-star rating and review and share this to your audience. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.